Welcome to another live stream with me, the Bearded Mystic, also known as Rahul. Nice to see you join today, and we're going to be looking at a video by Swami Sarvapriyananda, a video that I really have enjoyed watching bits of. I didn't watch all of it, but it was insightful. So if you've just joined, do like this on YouTube, give it a like, and we can. There's a live chat as well, so you can give me your point of view. You can give me your uh, views, or you can make a comment about the video, maybe an insight that you get. That would be really great. So we'll start with the video. It's pretty long. It's like 1 hour and 50 minutes. I don't know how long we'll whether we'll do the full 1 hour 50 minutes, but we'll definitely do the bit where he's talking with the interviewer, and then he does a live Q&A afterwards. So we'll see what we'll do. We'll go with the flow, but thank you for coming here, and we'll start with this. Let me just share the screen. Okay, cool. Okay, so we'll do this. Okay. Okay, here we go.
And now the director of Sunseed the Journey and today's host, Amartat Kaun. Sunseed the Journey and today's host, Amartat Kaun.
Well, hello everyone. Sorry for that little technical glitch there.
It's always nice when there's technical glitches, right? It brings a bit of normality in what would be a very intense talk. Whenever Swamiji does do a talk, it's always deep. It's always about consciousness. He loves going into more deeper aspects. So, yeah, it's kind of nice to have these little things in the beginning.
But I'm really excited to have you all with us for this Wisdom Talk number 16 in our series of enlightening discussions with some of our eye-opening contemporary spiritual thought leaders. Today is going to be a little bit different because we are going to take actually a video that we shot on May 21st, 2022 in Chicago. And then after we see the video, we're going to have a chance to meet live Swami Sarvapriyananda, take some of your questions, and then have a meditation led by him. For those of you who don't know or have never seen Swami Sarvapriyananda, he's a Vivekananda Vedanta monk. He was actually born in Eastern India, and as a young man, always had a hunger for how to realize the purpose of his life. He studied business management, and afterwards decided he wanted to become a monk, went into the monastery. Today, he's head of the Vedanta Society in New York City, the oldest Vivekananda Vedanta Center in the United States from before. So please, let's roll the video and listen to Swamiji. Say your name, what center you're with, and then tell us how you got inspired or with an individual or an event in your life to become a monk.
Well, I guess I'd start with the fact that I'm a monk of the Ramakrishna order, and my name is Swami Sarvapriyananda. And how did I become a monk? That's actually not so easy to answer. I mean, all the way back, I can remember as a kid, I grew up in this house where there was books of Vivekananda, and I was a bookish kind of kid. So I read a lot. This was way before the internet and cable TV, so books were the go-to for spending time. And I read a lot, and what struck me was that is this really true, that uh, God really exists and God can be experienced, and that is the purpose of human life, and that I too could do it, and I not only could do it, this is actually what human life is meant for, and that rang so true for me, even as a child. So all the way back, I can remember even when in grade 8 or 9, I used to think, what will I be when I grow up? And I was fascinated, still am, by aeroplanes. So it used to be a pilot first, and then search for God. I didn't quite know what a monk was. And very soon it became, search for God became the only thing. And by the time I finished college, I had decided I'm going to be a monk.
So this is the key thing. He talks about that wanting to know God or see God became everything. So that is, I think, a number one thing is having the desire or the itcha to really know and see God. So that's pretty cool.
I didn't explore too far because the Ramakrishna order was very close to our family. My parents were devotees. And I found the teachings, especially of Swami Vivekananda, very congenial, very something that I took to very easily. So the moment I finished my studies, I went straight to the monastery and joined. And here I am. And thank you for having me on this program.
While you were in the monastery as a monk, what would you say were some of the, or actually a very memorable experience you had as you were being, going through the process of deepening?
Oh, that's a much more difficult question. When you say memorable, obviously the first few days of monastic life, when I made the transition from being a student in a business school to being a novice monk, those days are very clear in my memory. I remember, that I had some money with me when I entered the monastery, and I thought I'd better donate it because I'm not supposed to keep money. And they were saying, no, that's all right. And then I said, this is the last donation I'm making, so don't make a big deal out of it because I won't have any money to donate after this. I still remember one of the elderly monks saying, we have got a funny one. So, and something came up about vacations. I said, all right, I'm going to go into a permanent vacation. Being a monk I'm retiring early. So, yes, the initial days, we were very fortunate to be under a master, the head monk of the ashram where I joined, wonderful Swami. And over the years, I realized how important that was, the formative influence. When you come new into a monastery, you are fresh and you're very idealistic and you're very eager to learn and you take impressions very fast. So
This is the importance of having a guru and a guru that is competent, because now we have people like Swamiji. Having the right person to guide you in life is extremely important. So it's really nice. You can kind of feel the vibe of how much respect he has for his guru, for his teacher. So that's really nice to kind of see and observe. Um, but I agree, like Swamiji also has a really good sense of humor. He always has interesting anecdotes, or if you've been watching his videos on YouTube or been listening to them, he always has a unique take, and it's sometimes self-deprecating as well. Like he mocks himself for being so into doing these long talks and everything. Um, but he is a very engaging speaker.
all the good, noble, spiritually powerful impressions are absorbed in immediately, and they last you a lifetime. So yeah.
Where were you a monk at?
The ashram where I joined the order is called Ramakrishna Mission Vidyapit Deoghar. That's in the eastern part of India. It's an ancient Shiva temple there. It's called Baidyanath Dham. Goes back thousands of years. There is an ashram nearby. It's a school for kids and also an ashram with monks there. So I joined there. It's a beautiful place. It's one of the first schools established by our order in 1922. So my initial years there, it's a wonderful atmosphere for a young monk to grow up there, especially the training given by our senior monk, Swami Suhitanandaji, who is now a vice president of our order. Very revered. And he's especially good with training younger monks. I still treasure, for example, the night walks. The group of novices, after the day's work, we would go for half an hour walk with the senior Swami, and we were supposed to recite, we were supposed to memorize a shloka of the Gita, verse of the Gita every day. And we were supposed to recite that and give a translation as best as we could. And then there would be wonderful discussion, about spiritual life, any questions we had, and he would tell us inspiring stories of other monks he had seen. And those I have retained over the last more than 20 years I've been a monk, and I see myself sharing many of those things in my talks. That was one part of my monastic life which was very important, very significant, I think. The next was when I went to, yes, a very important part was meeting senior monks. Somebody told me the beauty of an ashram is the senior monks, advanced elderly monks, and the newcomers. That shows an ashram is vibrant. You have these people who have spent a lifetime in spiritual practice, and you have a flow of fresh blood coming in, and newcomers seeking, and that's really the beauty of an ashram. So there were a number of wonderful swamis I met over the last 20 years whose, they provide inspiration and they provide a spiritual stimulus and spiritual insights too. One of the first I met there was in that ashram where I joined, apart from the senior monk who was the head of the ashram, was this Swami called Swami Pavanananda. He was an Irishman. And he had come to India in the interwar years between the First World War and the Second World War. He had heard about Swami Vivekananda, and he wanted to be a disciple of Swami Vivekananda. When he came, he heard that Swami Vivekananda had passed long ago. But he went and joined the order, became a monk eventually. He was a wonderful Swami, a deeply spiritual man, a deeply happy man. I mean, just to share, I have so many stories about him, but just to share one. In the last years of his life, he's losing his memory a little bit. I would walk with him down to his room after the evening prayers. And I remember when we were entering his room, I would help him to take off his shoes. I remember him looking down at me and saying, I don't know where this place is. He doesn't even recognize his own room. He's forgotten. I don't even know where this place is. But I do know one thing, that I'm in great joy. I am in place. Wow. Now, that's amazing. Loss of memory. I've seen old people, loss of memory, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, these things destroy a person. This person's joy was something that was untouched. As the other, other parts of his being fell away, that thing shone forth even more brightly.
Can I ask what?
That is a unique tale. And what I really like about what Swamiji is saying is that there's importance in being with, elder people, especially for a spiritual organization. It's got to think of posterity, about its future. So if you have an ashram, like Swamiji has, you need to have the flux of the elders who have the experience and the wisdom and the knowledge to share based on their experiences, along with the scriptures and the understanding of the scriptures, and then having fresh young minds who can not only take in that wisdom and those experiences, but maybe also challenge them to take them to another height. So I totally agree. And what's interesting is Swamiji remembers a particular person, an Irishman, and um, it shows the diversity in the Ramakrishna mission itself, but also the fact that the person was losing their memories and was, possibly going through dementia, and yet felt incredible joy. And that tells you that there is something separate when it comes to our memories and our feeling, like our emotions, our um, thoughts. There's something that is at the background, and that I would say is that joy, that internal joy, which is always present. It's ever present because it is that pure awareness itself. But again, the one thing that we've been discussing on this channel is that, and which is really important, is that having the foundation knowledge is what brings you the everlasting joy, not some, it's not something where you get drunk from and then there's a come down. No, this is an everlasting joy. So I got a question. Does Vedanta believe in the concept of Krishna being the absolute? It depends what you mean. There is only the absolute. That is Advaita Vedanta. Vedanta itself depends. There will be dualistic schools which will say that Krishna is the only thing, but in Jeho Rakeshi, TikTok Panditji, but in Advaita Vedanta we say there is only the absolute, and Krishna is basically the relative aspect of the absolute. It is a form of the absolute, an object that has come from that pure awareness. But the difference between Krishna and us is that Krishna knows what its true form is. Therefore, Krishna understands that it is formless awareness or Nirgun Brahman, and that's the difference. Um, that's my interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, and also in terms of understanding what Krishna is. And when I say Krishna, but also people like Ramakrishna, the order that, or Swami Vivekananda, or any guru for that fact, they are the absolute, in the sense they know they're the absolute. People like me, we're still trying to understand that we are the absolute. Hence, we find that there is duality in what we do and what we're saying. So, that's the difference. But let's continue with Swamiji's. Yeah, thank you, and pranam to you, brother. Thank you. So, but Swami Sarvapriyananda is phenomenal, man. Phenomenal. I absolutely adore him. And the entire squad on live and direct. I think Vedanta denies Krishna being the God, the supreme personality of Godhead. Vedanta is all about the study of consciousness. Well, technically, Women's Corner, what you're talking about is probably ISKCON, and they say that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, but we do not deny that Krishna is that, but we say that everything in existence is the Godhead. Thing is, this Nirgun Brahman cannot have a personality. It is not a person. The moment it's a person, it means it has a form. And with a form, it means it is subject to decay, subject to change. But if anybody has read the Gita sincerely, without their own personal bias, they will understand that Sri Krishna makes it very clear that there is the witness consciousness, Purusha and Prakriti. And the Purusha is real because it is changeless. A personality or a form means there's change. Therefore, if Krishna has a form, that means Krishna is not the changeless, is not Sat. So this is where people in ISKCON shoot themselves in the foot, in my opinion. But they are also part of Vedanta. Vedanta is a massive field, if you want to say. What you're talking about is Advaita Vedanta, where it is the study of consciousness. So, a rose by any other name is still a rose. Exactly. You may call it Krishna. We see it as Brahman or Nirgun Brahman. And if we want to make some concessions, we will say it is Saguna Brahman, it is Sarkar, but it is Nirakar. It is formless, although it appears to have a form. So, yeah. But wonderful question. Really nice question and comment.
What is the objective of Vedanta or the Ramakrishna order?
Yes, Vedanta is a spiritual philosophy of Hinduism. Literally, it's the teachings of the Upanishads. Upanishads are texts found in the Vedas, and they contain the final teachings, the highest spiritual philosophical teachings of the Vedas. And so that's called Vedanta. Anta means end or final. So the end of the Vedas in the sense of the final teachings. And behind any form of Hinduism, you would find some flavor of Vedanta. So, for example, the Vedanta that we follow is called Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. Of course, interpreted and taught afresh in the 19th century by Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. What's the goal? The goal is nothing short of enlightenment, a realization of who we are, and who we are, they are quite straightforward about this. You are none other than God. You are one with God. Not in the sense of a person. The moment I say this, especially in the Western world, the first reaction is from, I've heard at least 2 professors saying to me, and doesn't that make you narcissistic? But it's not about the limited self. When I say you are God, it means everybody's God. And it's not that the limited self, this little fellow Sarvapriyananda is God. No more than a wave in the ocean would be the entire ocean. It isn't. But you are one with God.
An incredibly important point that is made here, the distinction. Remember, when we say Aham Brahmasmi or I am Brahman, or in the Gurbani it is said Brahmgyani Aap Nirankar, that doesn't mean that we're saying that this form is God. You know, what we're saying is there is only God. There is only this formless. And he gives a great analogy. Today, my meditation session that I did on Zoom, it was about the ocean and wave, which is quite interesting because it was a spontaneous thing. So yeah, for example, the ocean and the wave are the same. You know, it's the same water. I think Swamiji is going to go into it a bit more, but you know, uh, it's a common misconception that people have about Advaita Vedanta that we suddenly think that, you know, we think the person is God. That's not what we're saying at all.
There is, at the core of your being, there is God. In Vedanta, it's called Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss. And to realize that, to realize our true nature, that is the purpose of life.
Mm.
One might say that isn't the purpose of my life, whatever you might say or whatever Vedanta might say. But actually, it dovetails quite well with what we want in life. We want fulfillment in life. We want to overcome suffering in some deep existential way. We want a solution to suffering. And that's what Vedanta promises. And in fact, not just Vedanta. If you take a big picture view of the whole thing, then every religion promises that in different language. The core idea in every religion is that there is a transcendence of our human condition. It's possible. Not only is it possible, it must be done. That's what we are here for. And so that's what Vedanta promises. You do these spiritual practices and you realize who you truly are. Yes.
So when I'm reading about Ramakrishna and Yogananda, there are many stories of them going into the highest stage of samadhi or materializing in different places, all sorts of things that we would call paranormal. Is that something that's just in literature, or have you actually experienced people in today's world who have these type of experiences?
I'm interested in Swamiji's answer with this. It's quite a good question. Yeah, because anyone that's read autobiography with the yogi, the one by Yoganandaji, he talks about this a lot in his book. And if you read also the Gospel of Ramakrishna, there's kind of talks about this. So I'm intrigued to know what Swamiji is going to say because he's very pragmatic, very practical. So I'm interested in his answer.
Before I answer that, let me say that is absolutely unimportant. And also, it's actually
That is key. He says it's absolutely unimportant. You know, we all want miracles and, you know, all these type of stories. We want the miraculous. He's right when he says it's extremely unimportant. If you want freedom for yourself, freedom from suffering, does it matter to you whether someone can appear in another place? Does it matter to you that they can materialize things? Like, if you think about it realistically, if you want to be free from your human condition, that's not important. You know, if someone can just produce sacred ash, so what? I mean, there's probably a magic trick to it, but so what? Even if it was genuine, what difference does that make? Does that take you out of suffering? Does that bring you closer to God? No. It may build up some sort of faith, but faith in something temporary, faith in something changing, which is not permanent. So, but yeah, I really love Swamiji's honest, man. That's what I like about him.
Is that something that's just in literature, or have you actually experienced people in today's world who have these type of experiences?
Before I answer that, let me say that that is absolutely unimportant. And also, it's actually against true spirituality. That's what spiritual masters, teachers in different religions throughout the world have always emphasized. Um, this attraction for the occult, for the
Just before I start, before we continue, it reminds me of something about in the Bible. If you remember, it's really unique, actually. You know, like in today, Christianity is all about miracles, the miracles that Jesus did. What's the number one thing that Jesus said about whenever he did a miracle? He said, never tell anyone. So that was his way of saying it's unimportant and it's got nothing to do with spirituality. But how many people think that only because there's a miracle, because some prophecy has come true, that suddenly Jesus is true, you know, or God is true because of that? It's a really, if we think about it, it's a very deep insight. Um, so um, so yeah, let's continue on with this.
mysterious, for the paranormal. Um, this is a huge diversion away from true spirituality. So, caution aside, buyer beware aside, is this true? Are those things true? I would believe so. I would believe, and I don't think there is anything supernatural about them. I firmly believe there are capacities of the human mind which we have not plumbed yet. And these things are interesting as far as, say, psychology is concerned, or even neuroscience is concerned. So scientists should take an interest in these things and find out more about it. But if you are a spiritual seeker, if you are seeking enlightenment and freedom from suffering, in that case, one would do well to steer firmly clear of such things. Have I seen such things? To some extent, not too many, but a few things which can't be explained otherwise. You know, the Swami whom I mentioned, Swami Pavanananda, the 90-year-old Irish Swami, towards the end of his life, I saw a few cases of what could only be telepathy, like literally seeing what's in my mind. You can explain it away as coincidence, but I chose not to. But it's not important. It's just not important. And one should be very careful about not getting diverted to that kind of thing. It can be very attractive to dabble in those things.
So
I agree. People love going towards the occult and the paranormal, and people. I mean, okay. Number one thing, I know this because of my algorithm. Not my algorithm, TikTok's algorithm about my content and consumption. But I keep getting stuff about the paranormal and the occult, even like psychic readings and all that on TikTok. And the thing is, I'm not interested in that stuff. But these things attract people but it takes them away from really knowing who they are. It takes them away from spirituality. It takes them away from understanding their true nature. And that's why I don't really like that stuff, because as Swamiji said, there's no reason for us to not believe it. I do think that some of these aspects are true, but what difference does it make to my life? What difference does it make to my spirituality, towards my meditation? So, Women's Corner, you said, would you like to make a comment on the Hare Krishna chant? It's a chant. It's a mantra. People they like it. I have no comment really about it. You can do any chant and it will get you into a trance, or into or it may make you feel a bit sleepy. It's really up to you to know what you feel and what you experience. But the thing is, when you're chanting, the question is, are you aware of the chant? What should happen eventually with chanting mantras, and the whole purpose is that the chanting should happen automatically and you become a witness to the chant. So you don't get lost in the chant, you become aware of the chant. That's the difference. And that's the key point to remember. Um, Rahulji, I think that the creators of the algorithm just lump a lot of stuff together because they're unaware of the differences. Yeah, I think so. I think when it sees that I follow a lot of Hindu creators, I think it thinks that it means New Age nonsense. But anyway, let's get back to Swamiji.
So how would a person know if they are enlightened? Or how can you judge if someone else who seems to be a great being and conveys a lot of wisdom, if that is the goal, then is there a way to evaluate yourself or others?
Right. First of all, can you evaluate others? The answer would have to be a qualified no. There are descriptions of enlightened people, and when you would look at the descriptions, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks the same question to Krishna. How would you describe an enlightened person? Yes. When you talk about enlightenment and freedom, one would like to know what's it like to be enlightened. Absolutely. Right. So, and Krishna gives a detailed description, not once, I think at least thrice in the Bhagavad Gita. But if you notice those descriptions, they're all internal. That means internal to the enlightened person. So when all desires which infest our heart, the human heart, when they drop away, and you are centered in the radiance of the self. Now, how do you know the desires have dropped away and the person is centered in the radiance of the self? Only that person knows. So in that sense, one cannot directly judge whether another person is enlightened or not. But as I said, it's a qualified no. There are ways. One way would be you would feel very uplifted, very purified. It's only word I can use is holy. That's a good word. That you would sense the holiness of the person, and that person would communicate some of that to people around. It's an unfailing thing. I've noticed with some of the very senior monks of the order, when you go near them or in their company, it just the whole atmosphere is surcharged with God and spirituality and nobility and a kind of, for example, the 13th president of our order, Swami Ranganathanandaji, who was very well known, like an international ambassador of Vedanta. In his company, you would know that this is truly what is meant to be a noble person, a really high-minded person, quite apart from being enlightened and spiritual. I suppose he was enlightened. If you ask me, have you met any enlightened person, I would count him as one of the few I would think as being truly enlightened. But noble, high. I met this young monk. He told me that he became a monk because this Swami Ranganathanji, used to go to their city to teach. And his mother used to visit and join the classes. And he was a little kid who would accompany his mother to the classes of Swami Ranganathananda. And he doesn't remember anything of the classes. He just remembers, this is a man. I would like to be like him. So when he grew up, he said, I wanted, no, a kid admiring a monk. It's not a football player or a movie star or an action figure or somebody. But he says, this is a man, I would like to be a man like this person. And he's not alone. Swami Ranganathanji is not alone. There are others, some known, some not so known. But even there, one could be mistaken, One could be a great enthusiast and could be easily carried away. So there is no cut and dried way of seeing that person. Would you know yourself you're enlightened? I think a very good caution would be, I always say, it's a very good idea, even if you're enlightened, to consider yourself to be on the path. It's much more dangerous to be not enlightened and then think that you're enlightened. One can do enormous spiritual damage to oneself and to others also.
Yes.
So there are cases of people who are fairly well along in the path, and then they consider themselves enlightened, and then they start teaching, and then it leads to all sorts of trouble for them and for many others also.
In the spiritual community.
What a wonderful answer. It's true. I mean, so there's two things I wanted to say. One was, when you see someone spiritual and you see their nature, you see the way they interact with people, you see their humility, you see their kindness, it does inspire you, and you do want to become like that person because you recognize in them that there is a better way of being a human being. Forget about enlightenment, but a human being. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is this, that, and I agree with Swamiji, that you should never say that you're enlightened or say that you know everything. It's very important to say I'm on the path. And I agree completely, because the moment you say you're enlightened, you have a lot to prove. And if you mess up because you're not ethical, or you start charging extortionate amount of money and you're spending it on weird things, it can cause damage. Whether that means that you're not enlightened or not, that's not the case. You could well be enlightened, who knows? But the thing is, it brings incredible damage to the credibility of spirituality, especially when the major population, the general public, is not attuned to what spirituality looks like. And I've seen a lot of people claim that they have seen God, know God, but they're nothing speaks of that, and when nothing speaks of that, it's very hard to believe. So yeah, I think tomorrow in my episode that's coming out for the podcast, I talk about this, that it's really important to uh, have your integrity, be honest, don't be a hypocrite when it comes to your spirituality. You got to be the same as you are at home, as you are at your spiritual place of worship. It should be one and the same. So I agree with Swamiji. Very beautiful answer, one that we should think about and one that we should practice, because I think the moment you say you're enlightened, or that you have realized God or seen God or whatever, like things like that, be ready to be scrutinized and be ready to be criticized, in my opinion. Um, these are very easy words to say, but very difficult to prove, and even more so difficult to judge. And also, what happens if you think you've seen God, or you know God, or you realize God, or you know yourself? You could also be fooling yourself, which then means you will stop practicing, and therefore you stop learning, you stop progressing when there should be progress or learning to be taking place.
We have many stories, unfortunately, of people who have been, very inspiring leaders to others, and yet their human failings have pulled them in a different direction.
And they can recover and go on in the spiritual journey, but the problem is it creates harm to others. I have met people who've been shocked by the behavior of their, like very beloved spiritual master. Now, I wouldn't be as upset as those people because I know human beings are human beings and we are all on a spiritual journey. But it's just that at a certain stage early stage in our journey, I would want my ideal to be perfect. So I consider this person to be spiritual, so he or she must be perfect. That doesn't work. As I go along in my spiritual journey, we become much more balanced. All right, nobody is all that great, nobody is all that bad either. And the point is, we must all become spiritual. We can and we must. That's more important. That's a more mature approach to take in spiritual life.
Do you think enlightenment is something that it's like a threshold that you pass and then everything is changed? Or is it something you think that comes in different waves?
That's a good question to ask, and I'm afraid my answer must be again yes and no. In Advaita Vedanta, definitely there is a threshold to be passed. It's clearly, there is a point, you can call it a breakthrough. There are technical names for it, that the moment of enlightenment. There's a word in Sanskrit, Brahmakara Vritti, that translates into a mental modification of the form of Brahman, whatever that might mean. But it just is a breakthrough. There's a clear before and after. Afterwards, nothing is the same anymore. You know that that is real and you are that reality, not as you as a person. It's not that you as a person become God. It's not even that you as a person become free. You are free of the person. I like that phrase. I don't know where I read it, but that's so true. The person still continues, but you are not that anymore. The person is still you, but you are not that person anymore. That person doesn't exist without you. So, yes, there is a before and an after. However, that may be instantaneous, clearly a sharp division, but there is a lot that leads up to that. In most cases, a person has been seeking and trying for years and decades at that moment when that breakthrough comes. It does come for a very few people spontaneously, I gather, reading the lives of Ramana Maharshi, or, for example, Eckhart Tolle, the Power of Now, and a few others who seem to have spontaneously awakened. So that's the breakthrough, yes. It can be instantaneous, and there's a clear before and after. And after that, there is no question of any more confusion. There's no question of that you are that Atman or consciousness, whatever you call it, that reality. It's effortless, just as being Amartat or Sarvapriyananda is effortless. I don't have to practice being Sarvapriyananda morning and evening. And even though it's a given name, I mean, just 20 years before I didn't have this, before becoming a monk, I didn't have this name. Only after my initiation into the vows of monasticism, we're given this name. And yet that's become so natural to me. How much more natural is our real natural, the reality which we are, Atman? So it becomes effortless. You realize you always wear that, and you wonder how I never saw that. All right, the other side of the picture, it is progressive. Now, knowledge can come instantaneously. When it does come, you may be seeking for a long time, but the breakthrough comes instantaneously. However, the mind is a machine. It's a creature of habit. So, and all this has been studied so deeply in ancient India. There are whole texts about it. There's one called Jivan Mukti Viveka, written about 700 years ago by an Advaita master, a study of the free while living. You're enlightened and still in this body. And there they say that true enlightenment has three components. One is this breakthrough. They call it Tattva Jnana, the realization of reality. The other one is a control of the mind. It's not helpfully called Manonasha. Literally, it means annihilation of the mind. It's not literal annihilation of the mind. It's the ability to have total control of the mind, of merging in samadhi, for example. And then the third one would be purification of the mind. It's called Vasanakshaya, the eradication of conditioning, past conditioning. Now, if all three are well developed, you have the breakthrough, you have the ability to plunge your mind into deep meditation at will, and your mind is scrubbed clean. you are truly, fully enlightened. However, those texts say that it is possible that sometimes people do make the breakthrough. And this was a phenomenon well known in ancient India. And their recommendation is something exactly the opposite of what happens today. Their recommendation was such a person should dive into spiritual practice deeply again. Because for the first time, you're no longer seeking, you have found it. So the recommendation is stay there and purify the mind.
And keep seeking.
Keep seeking or stay with it. You are very well placed now. Don't go out and start giving talks, or go on a lecture tour or write a book or something. Until the mind becomes steady in that realization and the mind is purified. And they say that those who have been on a progressive path for many years have an advantage there, because they've struggled to keep to a moral life, build character. They've struggled with meditation morning and evening for years maybe. And when the breakthrough does come, it's manifested that much more easily. It's much more easier to live the life, to manifest your knowledge, your enlightenment in day-to-day life. Otherwise, what happens is, a person with a very good grasp of Vedanta, maybe even the breakthrough, would still struggle to, manifest it in life. When faced with nasty behavior or physical illness, or maybe failure in some external endeavor, might again just be overwhelmed by negativity in the mind. At the same time, knowing that I am not the mind. It's a peculiar situation, but it could happen.
So how do you see your work today? You've been part of this New York Center, you've gone...
It's a very interesting answer. And I agree. I think for the majority of us, it is definitely a progressive path. We have to take our time. We have to kind of get to understand the teachings, kind of marinate in the teachings for a while. And, the mind does crop up with its little play. And it's all about still establishing yourself in spirituality. I think that is more of the norm today. If it was a norm back in ancient India, then it's definitely a major norm now. Although I do think that this truth can be experienced directly, but I think for it to completely transform, it will take time. For example, nowadays we probably don't see it as much, but um, but back in the day when I had like the PlayStation 1, when you used to turn it on, when you put the game on, it will go up to 100% and you'll say loading, but it used to be quite slow and steady. And that's very similar to our spirituality. We will get to 100%. The game will load. Your spirituality, your spiritual realization will be there, but it will take a little while to load up and for us to fully acclimatize to and fully immerse ourselves into. So, um, yeah, I do agree with Swamiji on that point.
See your work today. You've been part of this New York Center. You've gone through these experiences in life. You're out in the world more with like this, having talks with people. How do you see what you feel like your work is and what you can bring right now?
Right now, I am at the Vedanta Society of New York. And that's a small place, but it's pretty historical because it's the first Vedanta society established by Swami Vivekananda, who was the first teacher of Vedanta to come out of India to the West. And in 1894 in New York, he started the Vedanta Society of New York with the objective of spreading the ideas of Vedanta. His interest was not so much to get converts into Vedanta, rather he, like his teacher Sri Ramakrishna, firmly believed that all the religions embody this highest truth in different language, philosophy, rituals, but they have this core, all of them. And if one could spread these ideas, people without converting to Vedanta or Hinduism or anything, remaining Christians, remaining Unitarians, Catholics, whatever, Muslims, Jews, but they would have this, the idea that spirituality is this is firmly the center of not only religion but also life. That's one. It is possible to become deeply spiritual, enlightened in this very life itself, and we must actually. And third, there's absolutely no need to be narrow or fanatical about religion. I mean, every religion is a treasure house. It's like a common heritage of humanity. If these ideas were to percolate throughout American society, and he saw that this country had probably a greater chance of manifesting Vedanta in society than maybe even India, which was hierarchical. At that time it was colonized, and there are so many huge problems to overcome, whereas this country was founded on the ideals of liberty and freedom, and there was a freshness about this country. And he liked the American pioneer spirit, the can-do attitude. So he loved this country. And so I see myself as taking that work forward in the 21st century, conveying this idea that our real nature is divine. Divine means in this sense that we are beings of awareness, we are beings of consciousness. And in a deep sense, it is all right, and we can realize this in this very life, and we should make an attempt to realize it. One of the most powerful ways, the most powerful way I know, is Advaita Vedanta. So yes, in general spirituality, but in particular Advaita Vedanta, which I find is very direct, it's very rational, highly compatible with our modern scientific mindset. If I were to take out to meet a group of skeptics and atheists and scientists, which I've done again and again, more so after coming to the United States.
Especially with the youth today, they're more into rejection of God than they are in acceptance.
Right. The one thing that I would always roll out in front of such an audience is Advaita Vedanta. I mean, there is enough of faith-based religion. The problem is faith-based religion requires faith. Even to get underway, you require faith. And it works. But it works only if you have faith. If you start with questioning, if you start with skepticism, it won't work. You can't be a very good Christian and be Christopher Hitchens at the same time, or Richard Dawkins at the same time. However, the path of yoga, which is the path of mystical experience, the samadhi you talked about, that has a unique appeal in this day and age, not just in the United States, all over the world now, which is more or less the same mentality you see all over the world, among the young people especially, that you can actually experience God. How did the young Narendranath Datta become Vivekananda? He went and asked his master, have you seen God? And Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, straightforward. So that is a tremendous appeal in this empirical age we live in. Even more than that, and there also one can question that you think you've seen something. I'm sure you feel that you've seen God, but I'm here to tell you you had a stroke in some part of your brain, and that's what makes you feel that way. The reason there can be skepticism about these claims is they are not shared experiences. The experiences of mystics, however fascinating, are very private, very unique, very exclusive, very limited. In India, it was well known that you could have these experiences. It was open to everybody. Everybody could, and one would try to have these experiences. They would prove to you the claims of religion. Not so much in the West, because of the influence of, I think, the Catholic Church especially, which had a whole range of mystics. But the idea was these are something like Olympic athletes of religion. It's meant for them, but it's not for everybody. We are here to say it's for everybody. You can. But the danger with that is it can, you can dismiss it as, some kind of pathology, psychopathology. Always mystics have been, throughout the ages, have been dismissed as being crazy people.
If you read the Ramakrishna book, even his own contemporaries considered at some point he was out of his mind.
We worship him and we consider him the super mystic and avatar. All that's today. There were a solid number of people who actually saw him and day in and day out, and they thought he was crazy. So that's one problem with the path of mysticism. That problem is not there with Advaita Vedanta, because Advaita Vedanta only takes that much of our experience which is shared and common. We are awake, and we dream and we sleep. That's enough. Advaita takes that, and from there it moves in clear logical steps to demonstrate to you that you are this witness consciousness. Demonstrating that does not mean enlightenment. You can't
Mm.
argue your way to God, but it can take you very close.
Can you plead?
Pleading, yes, of course, if there's a God. It's like the Tibetans have a very good.
Um, there's always something about language, especially with Swamiji. But I kind of agree with him. For today's day and age, I would say Advaita Vedanta is the best philosophy that matches with a scientific mindset. I'm not saying that we should look for science's approval, but I think I could say that we can now see that there's a relationship or a friendship between traditional non-duality, meaning the non-duality that Swamiji is talking about, and science. And that's because it's true. What he's talking about is you can feel the truth of Advaita as a shared experience. We all can be aware that if I say there is the hand, you are aware that you have a hand with 5 fingers. We all feel that awareness. There's not one person who, unless obviously there's a defect in the body, will say they cannot feel or they're not aware of their hands with the 5 fingers. Everyone feels that. So I think I do agree with Swamiji that today, in today's day and age, um, if we really want to engage young people in spirituality, Advaita Vedanta is the answer. Um, it's been the answer for me, if I'm honest. It's through neti, through the traditional method of Advaita that I understood. That I'm understanding the truth, shall I say. Swamiji also humbles me as well, so that you're seeing this in action. Um, and this is the importance of listening to people like Swamiji, because they're able to engage with you as a person, so you know where you need to improve. Like they put a really nice mirror in front of you, where you don't condemn yourself into feeling guilt, but you see yourself as something to improve. And that's what I really like about Swamiji, in particular Swamiji, and his method. Women's Corner, you mentioned that devotion comes from the love we have for Krishna. I just want to say, no, this is an incredibly this is a very narrow way of understanding devotion. Devotion is limitless. Therefore, it doesn't have to be Krishna. You can have devotion to Shiva, to Jesus, to Rumi, to Kabirji, to Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Devotion actually really comes from yourself. As much as you may say it comes from the love you have for Krishna, but actually it comes from yourself. The origin of your devotion comes from you. That it's the importance that you place upon the love you have for Krishna. As much as we try to say there's selflessness in devotion, actually it all stems from the self, from yourself. So very nice. I know what you mean by that, and I personally disagree. I see your point, but I don't think it's entirely true. Devotion comes from yourself, from the faith that you have in the teaching. So if you feel that Krishna can help you, of course, Krishna will help you. You believe in that. That's fine. But it does come from you. Yeah. In my opinion, like, I'm more of a jnani, so, and I often joke on these lives and in my podcast that my mind is of a jnani, but my heart is of a devotee, is full of bhakti. And you need both. You can't do both. For example, if you just have devotion, how are you going to recognize Krishna? You're going to need knowledge. You're going to need your intellect to recognize Krishna. So that is very important in order to recognize. And actually, Jim at the 108 gives a very good comment to this. That I find that one of the four paths become prominent for me at different times, and that's very true. Sometimes I'm feeling devotional, other times I'm immersed in gyan. Often it's Raja Yoga, so that's meditation, and then sometimes Karma Yoga, where it's seva, selfless service. So we can have either one of those, and the main thing is it's all about you understanding the larger picture, this ultimate reality. You immersing yourself in this ultimate reality. How you get there is not important as much as getting there. Um, and being sincere. Like, for example, the problem that I have when we say something like, I feel devotion is the only way. When we say something like that, we're limiting the other paths. And in turn, we may discourage someone from spirituality, from really understanding spirituality. So, is that really right to do? You know, it's just a question to think about. In my opinion, if someone is more, I'm not someone that's very much into karma yoga, into selfless service. But I see when I see people who have that, I'm amazed by them. I think it's amazing. I think it's beautiful, you know? So just because it's not my path doesn't mean it's wrong or not beautiful. I can find it even more beautiful than my own path. And you should have that type of feeling so you remain humble and not arrogant. Because if you have devotion that becomes arrogance, then it's very, very hard to come out of that arrogance. Very difficult. And you will actually put more people off the journey than inspire people. That's just humbly my opinion. I can be wrong. But that's just my view. Um, Hari ji, Hari Nath, sir, can you explain on how to find your spiritual master? There's a great saying, and I believe in this saying, that when the disciple is ready, then the master appears. So I would say you'll find your master. Sometimes your master may be right in front of you. Maybe it will. Maybe your master will appear in a few years or in a few months. Maybe you've always had your master, but you didn't recognize your master. Everyone has to discover the master themselves. But let me make one really important point. That yes, it's important to have an external master, to see a master that you can admire, like as we're admiring Swamiji today. But what's more important is that external master should, in turn, bring your focus into the inner master, into the inner guru. This is very important. If a master is constantly telling you, or the devotees are telling you, this is an important point. If the devotees or the master is telling you to just focus on the external, run away. That place is only giving you half the truth. And as I've mentioned many times, half the truth is worse than a lie. So it's really important that we recognize this. So a true guru and a true community, the devotees, should tell you to listen to the inner guru, to find the inner guru. And that is the awareness. Once you become aware of awareness, that's your inner guru. So and what comes out of that, and this is from my own experience with my guru. My guru's passed on now, but what happened was, yes, it began as a guru and disciple relationship, but it became a spiritual friendship afterwards. That's the next stage. If you look at Rumi and Shams, a very beautiful example, it became friendship. Yes, at one time Rumi was learning from Shams, but then once he got the knowledge and the realization, then it was important to build it up as a friendship, and people got jealous of that friendship. Yeah. So there's different stages in Guru Yoga, if you would like to call it that. In my opinion, you want a guru that will bring it to friendship. if friendship is not the end goal, then unfortunately that guru will probably look to always be oppressive, or will always look to be put on a pedestal and you're less. Then there's no oneness. um, so I think it's really important we understand that. um, when did you come across Advaita? Around 10 years ago I came across Advaita, and I've never looked back. I love this philosophy. This philosophy really made sense to me, even though. So I found Advaita Vedanta while I was with my guru, and I would often talk to my guru about how scientific. Actually, this was maybe 8 years ago. I was talking with my guru about the scientific nature of Advaita Vedanta. So, and how it's appealing to not only me as a young person, as I was 8 years ago, but also it made sense in terms of scientifically. We could put it under a scientific microscope and somewhat make sense of it, which is very unique. So yes, so I hope that's clear. So it's a long answer, but yeah. Um, when the disciple is ready, master appears. Some interpret it as the master is you, and when disciple is ready, the internal master shines through. I think nowadays it's less important to have an external master. Um, I would say it's actually, in fact, today it's probably more important to have an external master. The only change I'll put in there, Martin, is that I don't think a master should have a mass following. I think that's where, and that maybe that's where you're right, actually, that it's less important to have an external master, because, um, how much can an external master who has, say, 1,000 followers, how are they going to help you personally? Really, it's when there's a close knit community can a master help you. Um, so it is important to have an external master, because they can tell you where you're going wrong, where's the room for improvement. Sometimes our intellect isn't sharpened enough to recognize these things. So yeah, that's what I mean. But I also do agree with you in terms of the master is you, and when the disciple is ready, the internal master shines through. But I think this is very rare, very, very rare. um Martin, maybe one in a million. um so yeah, but you can have external master. It can be dead or alive, in my opinion, because no master ever really dies. So that's the other caveat I have, and that's my personal belief. A lot of people may not agree with me. They may say that you need a living master, but if you can at least see your spirituality as alive, your master will automatically be alive, and you will see the criticisms, or the constructive feedback that's necessary for you to evolve spiritually, even from a master that's no longer on the earth. Um, so yeah, but I do believe having an external master, it's helped me. I can only talk from my own experience. I can't say everyone will have the same experience as I did. So I, I am open to understanding that as well. But yeah, you consider your master to be Maharishi. Ramana is a beautiful master. Um, so yeah, and yeah, you're right. The silent guidance wherever you go, it's there. It's for sure. You can feel that. So what we'll do, we'll continue on for a bit, and then we'll take like a 2-minute break. I need to go to the restroom, but I want to continue. So let's listen to a bit more, and then we'll have a 2-minute break. Um, and yeah, so let's do that.
Example to show that there's a needle on a mountain side, and then there are instructions. Which the first instructions would be very general: go up the mountainside. The next instruction would be more particular.
Considered at some point. He was out of his mind.
We worship him and we consider him the super mystic and avatar. All that's today. There were a solid number of people who actually saw him and day in and day out, and they thought he was crazy. So that's one problem with the path of mysticism. That problem is not there with Advaita Vedanta, because Advaita Vedanta only takes when we can not there with Advaita. We have a very good example to show that. There's a needle on a mountain side, and then there are instructions. Which the
So I'm
first
trying
instructions would be
to.
very general. Go up the mountainside. The next instruction would be more particular. Go near that you are this witness consciousness. Now, demonstrating that does not mean enlightenment. You can't argue your way to God, but it can take you very close.
Can you plead?
Pleading, yes, of course, if there is a God. It's like the Tibetans have a very good example to show that. There's a needle on a mountain side, and then there are instructions. The first instructions would be very general. Go up the mountainside. The next instruction would be more particular. Go near that huge rock there. And behind the rock, you find this tree. And near the tree, on the left side, you find this big root. Near the root, at the tip of the root, look closely, and you would find the needle. But even the last instruction would still leave you hanging there until you see it with your own eyes. So Advaita Vedanta is that last final instruction, which brings you really, really close. And then you're supposed to grasp it. There it is intuitive. You're supposed to get it. That really appeals to a lot of people, especially young people today.
Can we talk about East and West? Because there, this thousands of years of working with the mind and dealing with the real purpose of life is obviously not the mind, right? So we have this in India especially, and you have the Western material world. It seems like there's a shifting that's happening. Is this, some people have even said that East will become West and West will become East. Where are we in that?
You see a lot of that happening today. You're right. In my back of my mind, I'm hearing, professors, ranting against this essentializing approach of this modern academic approach would say that no, there's no such thing as the East or as a West, but there's certain truth to talking about the East and the West. In fact, one beautiful description of Vivekananda when he came here and spoke here in Chicago, at the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, when he stood up to speak, he was speaking to the West. The energies and the greatest achievements of the Western mind were before him. It was the universal exposition, the science and technology. Electricity was the cool thing at that time. It was on display. Edison was there. Tesla was there. I don't know if Edison ever came to Vivekananda's talks. There's no record of that. But Tesla did, which also counts for a little bit of a difference between their mindsets. But one of our Swamis later on, Abhedanandaji, actually met Edison, and Edison gave him a tour of his laboratory. So this was the Western world. And behind Vivekananda lay 5,000 years of patient development, inquiry and development of spirituality. Vast range of approaches, yogic, devotional, philosophical, ritualistic, so many things, Hindu and Jain and Buddhistic. So all of that sort of met at the moment when Vivekananda stood up to speak there in the World Parliament of Religions. And what we have been seeing in the last 100 years or so is actually the outcome of that, the flower blooming, as it were. After Vivekananda, all these other Vedanta societies, other monks came. Then you had other teachers, a whole range of yogis and swamis and lamas, all coming from India, from the East to America and other parts of the West.
Like in Sunseed, where we had the beginnings, or not the beginnings, but another beginning in 1970. Yes.
One of the explosions, a point of inflection, if you will, at that time. So this happened, and this is an ongoing process, and you will begin. What Vivekananda wanted has actually happened to a great extent. For example, it's no longer politically correct, polite, or even in good taste to claim my religion alone is true and everybody else is a heathen and a devil worshipper, and they all go to hell. There are some people who would still say such things and believe such things, but only in private, in their own gathering. They would be laughed off stage if they did that in a public gathering today.
Oh, people do it on TikTok. I need to tell Swamiji about that. I've had people call me a devil worshipper and stuff on TikTok. But yes, I mean, in the general public, no one's going to say that to you. Someone will write it bashing behind a keyboard. But yeah, no one will say it publicly, at least so we think. But the world is getting crazier.
Today. That was not so 100 years ago. So that has changed. Then this idea of the inherent equality, which is being worked out in the West and in the East now. In India, we have this tremendously hierarchical society. There's this wonderful teaching of the oneness of all existence, and in practice, a tremendously divided and hierarchical society. But all that's fast disappearing now. The equality in terms of race, castes in India, and gender. And all of this, you might say this doesn't have much to do with Vivekananda. I think it does. These were the ideas that were implanted then. I met this brilliant young Vietnamese researcher at Harvard. He was working in Boston College. He was working in the philosophy of work. And his general area was management. And he said, the more I researched it, I saw some of the greatest ideas in work as spirituality have come from one person in America, an Indian visitor in the late 19th century called Vivekananda. He didn't know anything about Vivekananda. He traced back many of the ideas in the New Age, the New Thought movement, back to Vivekananda. So now he is doing research on Vivekananda now. So yes, they are coming together. Here, primarily in the United States, but what happens here is very quickly echoed back in India and across the world.
So this, what I've seen, at least, is that the Vivekananda society, as I've seen it, tends to be still very relying upon the monks that come from India. Do you see also within Vedanta or the society structure a movement also to the West? So there'll be more Western swamis who will be leaders, and women especially. I know you have monasteries for women, but are they out front as leaders?
I certainly hope more of that will be happening. It is already happening. There are some of the nuns, the sannyasinis, who are there, are already well-known speakers and writers in their in their own standing. And I'm sure, and I hope more of that. We'll see more of that.
But the world demands it.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not just the Vedanta society. We are like the seed of this whole thing which has happened here.
It's in all the organized religions, pretty much.
Right. Even something as popular and widespread as Hatha Yoga, the physical aspect of yoga. In New York, every other block you would see a yoga studio. I remember a teacher of yoga from India in exasperation coming up to me and saying, what is this the Westerners are doing with yoga? You have beer yoga and goat yoga. This is a blasphemy. This is horrible. And I said, look, two things. One, it was in our hands for centuries. And what did we do with it? Nothing. It was dwindling and dying out, and it wasn't developing at all. It wasn't popular. Even in India, it wasn't popular. Now the Westerners got hold of it. It's a worldwide phenomenon now. And it's out of your hands, out of my hands, and good. It's no matter how we react or what we say, it's not going to make much of a difference. On the other hand, this pushback for authenticity, for being rooted in tradition, that's also good. So that keeps a kind of a corrective to this whole movement. It's not just yoga; it's all the others. It's Vedanta, it's Buddhism.
So Swamiji bigging up. That is actually a very nuanced and beautiful way of addressing the issues that we face. Like, for example, he talked about beer yoga and goat yoga, and he's right. For many years, until Swami Ramdev, and to be honest, this is maybe in the 2000s, only then did yoga become really popular through Swami Ramdev and the TV program that he had. Prior to that, it wasn't as big. And I would say possibly more people are doing yoga in the West because of Osho, or I don't really respect the person that much, but that Vikram Yoga who does the hot yoga, Yoga Ananda, through Kriya Yoga. These are the people that made it extremely popular in the West. Yeah, so and there's also that other guy. He recently also has been in trouble, but post his death, Yogi Bhajan. So um, I see. So what Swamiji is saying is right. You need to let it go, and then when you start, only then have you found there's value in the traditional teachings. Otherwise, nobody batted an eyelid. I'm telling you, when it was booming before it got manipulated, Indians were loving the fact that the West was taking control, was enjoying yoga. They loved it. I'm telling you, it's only now when we see the craziness that's come out that we now say this, we need to be more authentic. But I think this has come generally. Now we're finding it with Neo Advaita. At one time, we probably felt that this was a really great direct way, but now we realize that actually there's power in the tradition, and you shouldn't deviate too much from the tradition because um, it has disastrous effects, or it's not as authentic. But at one time, I think as an Indian, I was so amazed. And see, Swamiji is bringing my memories back of because when I got introduced to Advaita Vedanta, Tony Parsons came up. And although I didn't really feel any affinity to him, but I was like, what a unique way of him just getting people directly to the truth. I understand where he's coming from. But at the time, my intellect wasn't as formed, I would say, to see the nuances in the issues of what he was doing. Only now I see it, after years of practice, years of uh, doing the process of Shavana Manana Nididhyasana, do I understand that? So, yeah, you're right, Jemata D108. Some of the indigenous Hindus will not appreciate this message, but it is a nuanced message. And if they don't like what he said, it also says a lot about them too, because they should understand the nuance of language if they really have uh, gone deeper into yoga. So what we'll do, um, let's take a break now for 2 minutes. So we'll be back around 1:56 my time, um, and then we'll continue on. Yeah, ego Advaita. Yeah, that's what I mean. Pseudo non-duality. So we'll be back in 2 minutes, and then we'll continue on with watching Swamiji. Sorry about that. I got a call, so I had to just answer that call. So yeah, so let's begin again, listening to the great wisdom of Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. Here we go.
Keeps a kind of a corrective to this whole movement. It's not just yoga; it's all the others. It's Vedanta, it's Buddhism. So there are two books on Buddhism recently. Robert Wright, Why Buddhism is True, and I think Evan Thompson, Why I'm Not a Buddhist. I think he is a Buddhist, or at least he's a well-known Buddhist scholar. And his reaction, why I'm not a Buddhist, was that what's being taught to me here is a kind of mech Buddhism, an Americanized version of Buddhism, which is not authentic to any tradition. So this push for authenticity and tradition is also good. I don't know if that was your question.
Well, we're almost out of time, so what I'm hoping is, usually we end our wisdom talks with a meditation or a practice, and I'm going to ask you if you could record something that we can use later rather than record it right now, because I want to use these last couple of minutes with you to have you give a message direct to our viewers. If you would, I think you can look directly into the camera for this, and anything that's in your heart to share with the hearts of our viewers.
Well, the thing closest to my heart is Advaita Vedanta. We attend to so...
Hold on one second.
Yes.
Which place should you be looking? I did it correctly. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. Yeah.
We attend to so many things in our lives, except ourselves. One might say, that's not true, Swami. I look after myself very well. But yes, we look after the body. Maybe even we take therapy and look after the mind. But we're not the body. We are not even the mind. We haven't even begun to look at what we truly are. Vedanta is about who or what we truly are. And it's actually much easier than many of the things that we do in life. One of our senior Swamis used to say, the kind of work that you put in getting through examinations in university, with less effort than that, one can realize God. So I don't know if that is true, but yes, it's not all that difficult. And it's enormously rewarding. Even before the breakthrough or the highest enlightenment, it's rewarding at every step of the way. As you walk down this path of self-inquiry and discovering what I am, every day of our lives, we feel that its deepest meaning is there. It's really worthwhile that this path is true. I'll end with something that a kid asked me when I was a novice, more than 20 years ago. The little boy asked me, are you happy being a monk? And I was a newly minted monk. And what I said to him holds true even today. I said yes and no. Why yes? Because every day that passes, I feel this path is true. That there is something that's enormously valuable, nourishing, worthwhile here. There's nothing that compares with it, with seeking enlightenment. I'm not saying just being a monk, just seeking enlightenment for everybody. And of course I said no, because I think I could do a better job of it. I could meditate more and better, I could behave better with people, and so on. So yes and no. Spirituality is for everybody. Everybody can and should be spiritual. Thank you so much, Amatat.
Oh, I didn't recognize you as the same person. I thought it was someone totally different. Now I recognize it. It looks so different in the two. But what a beautiful talk, and we'll continue on because the question and answer session will be intriguing. But I think just listening to what Swamiji says about everyone can and should be spiritual, and I agree, because a world that understands its true nature, we would be rid of at least half of the issues we have today in the world. And it'd be more easier then for people to tread onto the spiritual path. So yeah, a very beautiful talk by Swamiji. One, I must say the questions were really good as well. The questions were getting Swamiji to answer in a very unique way. Now, I'm looking forward to how the audience is going to respond to Swamiji now. So this was a live session that they did, apparently. This one that's going to come up now. The other one was pre-recorded. So yes, let's see. Let's see what happens. Oh, I can't hear him. He must be on mute.
Any more questions?
Yeah, he it seems like he was on mute. The beauty of technology.
You're muted.
Well, technically, I was just muted, so excuse me for that. But I just want to say, don't go away, because we have Swamiji here in the studio to answer some of your questions live. Of course, you gave us many more questions than we have a chance to answer directly with you. But I hope you had as much, I say fun, but enjoyed the depth of what was given to us in the last 40 minutes by Swamiji. And you're hungry like I am to hear what he's going to say in a couple of minutes. Just
what I like is that he calls him Swamiji. Now, being someone from the West and saying that is very good. But on top of that, even today, we talk about the difference between East and West. Sometimes people in the East will not refer to Swami Sarvapriyananda ji as Swamiji. They just call him Swami. So I like that, actually. That's very nice of him.
Just to remind you, you can all go back and listen to the talk we just gave and the questions and answers that are going to come up by going to our website at sunseed.org/wisdom talks. We'll also be on our Sun Seed YouTube channel and our Facebook page, so you'll have lots of opportunities to review this in the future and look at all of our other previous wisdom talks. And why not take a look at the movie Sun Seed, The Journey, where we captured some of the great teachers that came in 1970 into the West to really bring another wave of bringing meditation and yoga into the West.
I'll have to check that out.
And finally, we support these free broadcasts by your help and your donations and your purchases from our Guru shop. So please go there and take a look. There's some great things there for you.
That was a bit strange, the Guru shop. But oh yeah, it is actually called the Guru shop. Okay. Interesting.
Okay, so if any of you missed the introduction to Swami Sarvapriyananda, he's the head of the Vedanta Center in New York City, and he's a fascinating human being. So let's bring you in now, Swamiji. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Amitat, and namaste to you. Namaste to everybody who's watching. And thank you for having me on Sun Seeds once again.
Well, it's our great pleasure, and I'm not going to really say any more. I think you've gotten more questions than you can handle, but please pick out a few, and I can't wait to hear your answers.
Thank you, Amitat. We'll dive right in. What I'll do is, there's some questions coming in live right now. I'll take up some of those, and a lot of good questions, which Amitat has put in a lot of hard work in organizing them. So he's shared some of them with me, and I'll try to answer some of those as well.
Great.
All right, here goes. On the live chat, there is Shalini who asks, Swamiji, once we understand what Tattvam Asi, what is Tattvam Asi by learning Vedanta, can we just do Upasana to abide in it, or do we have to read and listen to Vedanta on and on? Okay. What she's asking is, that thou art, the central teaching of Advaita Vedanta, is that there is one ultimate reality, existence, consciousness, bliss, and you are that. Our essential self is that. We have to realize that we are not this body, not this mind, not this limited being. We are this unlimited existence, consciousness, bliss. Now, what she's asking is, once I understand what is being said, do I have to meditate to abide in it, or do I have to read or listen to Vedanta on and on? I'll address that on and on part of it. That's funny at the end. If you meditate, you'll still have to meditate on and on, by the way. And so if you're studying Vedanta, it's not like a tedious process of keeping on reading and listening to teachings and thinking about it. If you meditate, you have to keep on doing that also. Now, when I realize, when I get a clear grasp that I am awareness, unlimited means I'm not born, nor do I die, immortal. I'm not limited in space or time. The entire universe is one with me. It is an appearance in my real nature as consciousness, and so on. This is what is meant by unlimited awareness. And it's a fact right now. We don't see it. But once we come to see it, now, can we just do meditation to abide in it? Look at the question. Am I going to abide in it with the help of meditation? It's like saying that once the wave realizes it is water, does it have to do a lot of meditation, that water meditation, I am water, I am water, I am water, to remain as water? You'll say, no, it was water even when it didn't, suppose it didn't realize it's water, it was water all the time. If the clay pot were to realize that it's clay, then what further practices does the clay pot have to do to remain, abide as clay? So you understand the drift of it. If we truly realize I am existence, consciousness, bliss, you don't have to, you're not supposed to do some more other things to become existence, consciousness, bliss, or to stay as existence, consciousness, bliss. If I am Sarvapriyananda, take another example, the water and wave example, the clay and pot example, but let's take our own example as this person. Even this personhood, I don't have to practice to know that I'm Sarvapriyananda. Once the name, monastic name Sarvapriyananda was given to me, initially it took some time to get used to it. But now, even this name which has just been applied to me as a name, monastic name given to me about 20 years ago, that has become so natural. I don't have to do any kind of practice that I am Sarvapriyananda. I have to meditate on the fact. No, it's effortless. So, I am existence, consciousness, bliss, unlimited awareness. This does not take any effort to become that, to stay as that, or to abide in that. I distinctly have the feeling, the question might be, Swami, I understand all that. But I still feel that somehow I have slipped away from that understanding. And how can I return to that understanding? Or I might say that in the midst of a lot of activities and a lot of challenges in day-to-day life, I don't seem to remain in my identity, real identity, as this witness consciousness, as unlimited awareness. I still start reacting as this individual being with all its quirks and defects. So how do I remedy that? That is a valid question. What is happening there is, if I am pure awareness, now as pure awareness, I'm at no point slipping away from my identity as pure awareness. Even my knowledge that I'm pure awareness does not go away. What is happening there is the mind. The mind is not mindful of its own nature. Because of its flickering nature, maybe it's untrained, unsubjugated, impure nature, it gets swept away in day-to-day activities. Now, there are two things to do there. One is meditation. There is a whole set of Vedantic meditations which corrects this tendency in the mind. Remember, even when the mind is swept away, even when in the midst of activities I am swept away into my identification as this person Sarvapriyananda, even then I am Brahman. But to remain centered in the midst of activities, in the midst of the ups and downs of life, meditation is very useful. And there is a whole set of Vedantic meditations called Nididhyasana. They are special meditations which enable us to, as you said, abide in it. All right. The second thing, more important thing, that read, listen to Vedanta, do it systematically, take up texts and follow it with the purpose. Now that you have understood it, with the purpose of deepening that understanding, so that this question goes away, that how can I abide in my real nature as Brahman? The question may be a more valid question, maybe, I would like my mind to reflect and manifest the truth that I have realized. I have realized I am the Atman, but my mind and in my thought, in my speech, in my behavior, I should be able to manifest that divinity within me. That's a good question. And that requires practice. That requires immersion, staying with what you have now newly realized. All right, enough said. Let me go to one of the questions which Amartya had shared with me. This is from Marie Claire. My question is, what is the wise and gentle sentience that gives me sensible and kindly advice? It comes unbidden and just gently advises. Why do we pray for guidance, and from whom is it given? As I understand from Advaita Vedanta, Brahman is not involved in our mundane lives, merely oversees in his joy unlimited. So whom do we pray to? How come there are avatars if there is nothing but Brahman? All right. Here is, I want to introduce the concept of two truths. Relative truth, which is in Sanskrit called Vyavaharika, transactional, empirical, relative truth, which we are abiding in now, what we see around ourselves. Here we are individual beings learning Vedanta, sitting online in an online community. This is called the transactional truth, relative truth. And the absolute truth, in Sanskrit called Paramarthika, which is Brahman, which is that there's one existence, consciousness. It's a bit like a movie on a screen. There is the screen and on which a movie is playing. Sometimes it's a comedy, sometimes it's a tragedy. But the movie is a movie. The screen remaining the same. A lot of things appear in the movie. They are not actually there. The characters are not there. The places are not there. The events did not happen. They are appearances. At the level of the movie, there is a plot. Clearly, a comedy is different from a tragedy. A horror film is different from a drama. So there are differences at the level of the movie. All of it is true. But a deeper truth would be, it's a movie. It actually is not happening. What's happening, what's there is the screen and the pictures on the screen and so on. Similarly, Brahman is the only reality, and it appears as this world of multiplicity and duality. Now, in this world, there is this world of diversity, and we find ourselves as individual beings. And Brahman is also here in this world as the God of religion. In theistic religions, you talk about God. So the concept of Brahman in Advaita Vedanta, there is this twofold. One is the absolute reality, Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss, which you are, which we all are actually. And there's this relative conception of Brahman as the God of religion. In Sanskrit, Saguna Brahman. The ultimate reality is called Nirguna Brahman, Brahman beyond all characteristics, beyond all attributes. But Saguna Brahman is Brahman with characteristics. Omnipotence, omniscience, all-powerful, all-loving, benevolent, all-knowing, and that is the God of religion. Why am I saying all this? Now we are better placed to understand what Marie is asking. Whom do we pray to? The moment you say we are praying, so I am an individual being, I am Marie, and I'm praying, I'm doing some kind of activity, and there is something or someone I'm praying to. This is all within the relative level. If, from my perspective as the absolute truth as Brahman, there's no point who will pray to whom. There is no second reality. There is not, from that perspective, the world is an appearance. You are one with the absolute reality. But that does not mean it is invalid to pray. That does not mean that God, religion, our day-to-day lives become invalid. This is something to be understood. Just because it is a screen does not mean that the movie is not there. The movie has to be realized as a movie. In the movie, all the roles played by the actors are valid. In the theatrical performance right there in Broadway, the actors are playing different roles. Some are heroes, some are miserable, some are villains. They're not actually heroes, villains, or miserable people, but they are actors. Being actors, they can fully play those roles. So in my role as Mari, I can always pray to God. The same Brahman who is Mari is also the God of this universe, is also the universe. And so all activities here are valid. After all, why should it not be valid? If, even as a Vedantin, if I am eating and drinking and talking and giving interviews and teaching Vedanta, what prevents me from just one thing, which is praying to God? All of this is within relative reality, all of which what we are doing, even all this Advaita, Vedanta, non-dualism, spirituality is all within relative reality, and so is God within relative reality. And this is from classical Advaita perspective. So it's perfectly valid to pray. Whom are you praying to? You, Brahman, in your role, in your limited appearance as Mari, are praying to that all-powerful, all-knowing, loving reality called God, which is also Brahman. Yeah. Let me follow up with a.
So very good answer. The Women's Corner, if I don't know if they're still on, but Swamiji really is answering the question quite well about how Vedanta sees reality. And this is one thing I used to get. This person doesn't comment as much on my TikTok videos anymore, but the person could never understand the difference of living in the transactional relative level and then from the absolute level. They couldn't see the difference in the two, and they constantly felt that one had to always be living in the ultimate reality level. It's impossible. It's difficult. We can't do it all the time. If we, at the end of the day, when you're hungry, your body's going to want food. You can't say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, and be full. The number one issue that I have with the ego Advaita or the pseudo non-duality, number one issue I have with them is by taking away the relative reality, you only look at the ultimate level, but it's not function. You can't function in that way. For example, if someone believes in this pseudo non-duality or is a teacher of this non-duality, the moment you hold a class, the moment you hold a meeting, the moment you do a YouTube live, the moment you upload a video on YouTube or TikTok or you do a podcast or whatever, you've ultimately said that the relative reality is true by default. No matter how much you may be barking off the tree of the absolute or the ultimate, you're still at the relative level. So hopefully these people will come across. Yes, I absolutely agree. Swamiji's approach, the way he answers the question, is skillful, masterful. I mean, it's really something to learn. I mean, it shows really how much he's immersed himself into the teachings. It's not necessarily just a thing he's learned to sound intellectually good. The thing is, first of all, you have to find this stuff interesting. Yeah. If you find it interesting, you're going to be intrigued, you're going to be excited to learn. Once that happens, half your work is done, you know. And because he loves talking about it, he will find different ways to answer it. But yeah, I was thinking the same thing. The way he was just flowing with the answer, I was just like, this is really amazing. Yes, I agree. There is a change in the energy with the interview and the Q&A. I agree. There is a slight difference. I think there is more thoughtfulness going in, although he's relatively the same in terms of he'll give the same answer. You're right. It's just the demeanor's different. The personality's coming across a bit differently. Theo is skillful too. Don't look left or right when crossing the road. Yeah, I mean, yeah, skillful if you want to kill yourself. Theo is definitely skillful in that. All these. So this is the one thing I want to say is learning Advaita through a competent teacher is so necessary, and Swamiji is the epitome, I think, of that. He really is a great. His presence shows how important it is to learn from the right sources and the right people. In fact, I think he gives a bit of hope in this day and age of gurus and spiritual teachers. I think he's the more he's a shining light in what would seemingly be a very dark world of gurus. He's kind of like the shining light, one of the few that are genuine and are good.
Another question, which is similar. There seems to be a paradox about getting enlightened during this lifetime and reincarnation. But the Swami says if one is unable to know Brahman, he or she can endeavor in their future births. But this statement contradicts Swami's statement again that there is no birth or death, but Brahman alone is. Would be helpful if this paradox could be explained. Yes. Now I think you know what I'm going to say. Two truths. Absolute truth, Brahman. Relative truth, there is God, world, individual beings going through lifetime after lifetime. Absolute truth, movie, screen. Relative truth, there are so many kinds of events which are happening within the movie. The paradox is when you say that there is one absolute reality, which is neither born, nor does it die, nor is it ever in suffering, nor does it need any liberation from suffering, and it does not even need any kind of spirituality. It is one perfect existence, and you are that. At the same time, we say, look, you are in suffering. You have gone through these cycles of births and deaths, and this process will continue until you attain liberation. And for attaining liberation, you better do spiritual practices like meditation and study Vedanta, do good deeds, and so on, until you realize that you are that absolute real. Now, which is it? Which is true? Are you Brahman? In which case, there's no need of all of this. Or are we this and are we going to become Brahman? Neither. We are Brahman right now. And all of this is also valid. How? Shankara explains this in just half a sentence. Jnana ajnanayoho upapatte. It all becomes logical. The paradox is resolved when you consider in terms of enlightenment and ignorance. From an enlightened perspective, Brahman alone is real. And all of this, the enlightened person does not say none of this exists. He has not switched up the movie. All of this is an appearance of Brahman. From Brahman perspective, perfectly all right. And I am that perfectly all right Brahman. Was that? Did not know it earlier. From the unenlightened perspective, even when we hear all this Vedanta, if I'm not yet enlightened, it will still feel very real. Here is this world. I don't know what Brahman you're talking about. It's some kind of theoretical idea, nice philosophy. I feel I may be Brahman. I hope I am Brahman, but I still feel that I am this body, mind. I'm this individual being. I am trying to understand Vedanta. I'm trying to meditate. I'm trying to lead a good life and struggling in life. All of this seems to be the reality. So to make this division, enlightened perspective, unenlightened perspective. In an enlightened perspective, individual being, birth, death, rebirth, all of that has meaning. And all of that seems to be absolutely real. And we have to follow that paradigm in order and try to realize that I am Brahman, from which perspective all of this becomes an appearance. Consider the movie example. There was some terrible tragedy, and we ask why all this is happening. From one perspective, movie perspective, yes, you can ask why all this is happening, why such sorrow, the hero faces such sorrows and challenges. We may weep in sympathy, but it's a movie. From that perspective, it's perfectly all right. Now, from the knowledge that it is, from the knowledge of reality, it's perfectly all right. Then you can enjoy the movie also. Even the sorrowful movie, the tragedy also becomes part of art for you, aesthetic for you. You are safe from the suffering. Now let me go to the questions in the comments. There's so many good questions. Then let me see. Rick is asking, regarding the example of all desires dropping away, if someone is supposedly enlightened yet behaving hedonistically, drinking, carrying on with women, etc., can we assume that he is not enlightened? Straight answer, yes. Qualified answer is this. Why would an enlightened person look for pleasure, happiness in the usual channels in which people, the unenlightened, do? We find ourselves limited and hankering for fulfillment. Then we look at the obvious channels of fulfillment. So being identified with the body has certain needs, like hunger and maybe taste. Most of the body really itself does not have too many needs. It's mostly in the mind. Even food, body has a particular need for food, and that's healthy food and little amount. But the mind has cultivated a lot of tastes, and for happiness we need all kinds of fine food and drink and entertainment, trying to fulfill myself. The person who is enlightened is already fulfilled, has realized that I am this limitless being, the entire universe is one with me. What is there that I lack? From that perspective, there's nothing that I lack. So this eagerness to grab things, to go around with a begging bowl in the world, begging for a little bit of happiness. The entire world is my own, is within me, or is an appearance of me. There's not one thing in the world which does not belong to me. So that should be the perspective of an enlightened person. If in spite of all of this, enlightened person still reacts like an unenlightened person to the worlds, to two things: terror and temptation. I without these gadgets and these entertainment and these fine clothes and food and vacations and whatnot, I will not be happy. I need those. Or terror, that something threatens me, my body, my physical well-being, my comfort, my status in life, my reputation, I feel terrified. If either of those two are there, we are actually in our limited identification. An unlimited person who's enlightened knows one's unlimited nature, would neither be moved by temptation nor by terror. And there are such people. We have seen enlightened beings, those you consider to be genuinely deeply spiritual, you will see all of them have this tendency. They're entirely independent of the push and pull of worldly terror and temptation. Okay. You might be getting the feeling I'm going to qualify my statement. I will qualify it a little bit, because I would be failing in my duty if I did not point out that the enlightened person is not bound even by our standards of morality. So in every one of these mystical traditions, you'll always have this example of a crazy enlightened person who may be behaving sometimes like a mad person. We have this saying that an enlightened person may behave like a child, may behave like a ghost, a ghoul, like a completely mentally ill person, or like a person jada, which means absolutely absorbed in the transcendent reality. From outside, there's no reaction, in samadhi. Or might be living what might seem to be a hedonistic life. The thing is, in such case, those cases are very rare. If you see a person who's pretending to be that, it really doesn't make a difference to us, because a person who is claiming to be enlightened and yet leading a hedonistic life may or may not be enlightened. We do not know. It's most unlikely that such a person is enlightened. And in any case, it doesn't make a difference to us, because it is understood in the tradition, a person who is a teacher has to be not only enlightened or spiritually far along on the path of enlightenment, but has to be of impeccable conduct. Otherwise, is not useful as a teacher. So such cases would, in any case, would have no bearing on us, because they are not going to be our teachers. David is asking, Swamiji, what can you tell us about your experience of the Holocaust? I do not have a personal experience of the Holocaust, but if you mean what do I think about the Holocaust, what is my personal view? I think you are asking about.
Before Swamiji will answer that question, I just wanted to raise the fact that I really like Swamiji's answer. Again, very nuanced, and someone may say, well, he's appealing to everybody. But if you think about it on a deep level, we can't really judge anyone. We don't really know anyone's spirituality. Now, for example, we can only make second guesses, and that's fine. As long as you know you're making a second guess. Like, for example, let's use occult Theo as an example. I do not know if he is enlightened or not. I don't know. I can only go by what he says and the issues with what he says. Whether he's enlightened or not, I don't know. I can't say. But I do find there's a disconnect in his teachings and his actions. Mostly the same with every other pseudo non-dual ego Advaita teacher. But frankly, I can't say if anyone is enlightened or not. And that's what Swamiji is saying, is that you may get a mystic or a guru who may take drugs. They may take hallucinogenics. There may be a shaman. They may be taking DMT. They may be taking mushrooms. They may be doing all sorts. But we can't judge them. We can't say whether they're right or wrong, or we can't say they're definitely not enlightened because they did this. We just can't say those things. But yeah, now someone's asked Swamiji about the Holocaust. I don't know why they asked him this question.
The problem of evil. There was a similar question sent to me earlier, which says that, is there evil outside of us? Who decides what is evil? Or is this only referring to the inner clouding and the obstacles that we need to overcome in order to see our true self? All right. I'll take David's question as a question about the nature of evil. Represented most horrifyingly in our age as the Holocaust, where 6 million or more Jews, just because of, for no fault of theirs, just because they belong to a targeted minority, because of their religious identity, they're just rounded up and massacred, one and all, in the gas chambers, in the concentration camps in Germany in Second World War. Look at the nature of this evil. Enormous numbers of people, all slaughtered without any mercy, and the suffering of the others, even those who survived, how traumatized and how much suffering there was in those camps. Also happening in one of the most advanced countries in the world at that time, in Europe, in the heart of Europe, in Germany, philosophically, culturally, literature, music, culture, industry, economic power, military power, in every respect, one of the most powerful and advanced nations of the world at that time. And yet this happens there. So this is evil, the sheer embodiment of evil. Now, how do you deal with that from a Vedantic perspective, from a spiritual perspective? There are different ways of dealing with it. One, that evil is a force in itself. So the question which was that is evil just the obstacles and ignorance in our mind? When we say ignorance and obstacles, it seems to be a very delicate thing. Ignorance. So you're ignorant about something. Just pick up a book and read about it, and ignorance will be overcome by knowledge. And yet, evil is not so flimsy. So there is something to the Christian doctrine of that there of the of a kind of force of evil. I think if you go to karma, which is a doctrine accepted by all schools in India, all Hindus accept karma and rebirth. Karma is basically causality: good, good, bad, bad, and none escape the law. Causality. So karma, reincarnation, that is an attempt to explain why things happen, good and bad. And it's something accepted not only in all schools of Hinduism, including all schools of Vedanta, but also in Buddhism, in Jainism, in Sikhism. All the Indian schools accept karma and reincarnation. Even deeper, if you say, no, that doesn't really cut it, I don't accept that, one can go to the Buddha's analysis that this is the very nature of the world, that this world will cause suffering. The Bhagavad Gita says, Prapya imam asukham lokam bhajasvaman. Krishna says it to Arjuna. Having come to this world, the word used is asukham. Literally, we translate it as unhappy. But in Bengali, ashuk, the word would mean disease, illness. This existence we have now is a kind of illness, is a kind of a disease. It has to be cured. And like disease, it causes unhappiness. Why would the Buddha say this? What is it about this world which is evil? Well, the nature of this world is change, is continuous change. And so what? Change is good. Yes, the thing is, when we try to make ourselves happy, we need many factors to be fine when we are for us to be happy. I want to be healthy. I want to be young. I want to be learned. I want to be successful. I want to be liked. I want things to be going on well around me in the community, in the world. So many things impinge on my happiness. And it's rare that all of these factors will come together in perfect equilibrium, which will make me perfectly happy. And if they do come together, if you're lucky enough to be really happy for some time, know for sure it's going to go away. It's going to go away. Why? Because the nature of the world is change. The nature of the world is change. The perfect combination of factors which made you perfectly happy is going to change the next moment into a less than perfect combination of factors. So the Buddha said, Anityam, anityam, sarvam anityam. Impermanent, impermanent, all is indeed impermanent. And then not only impermanent, kshanikam, kshanikam, momentary. It is changing moment to moment. All is momentary. Not only impermanent and momentary, empty. It is empty of any essence. Shunyam, shunyam, sarvam, shunyam, empty of any essence. And therefore, being impermanent and transient, momentary, and empty, dukkham, dukkham, sarvam, dukkham, all is dissatisfactory. It may not be intense suffering for all the time, but all the time it's definitely dissatisfactory. It's not perfectly all right. Even deeper than this, if you're looking for an answer for the question of evil, suffering, notice that yes, the world is miserable, it is always changing, and the real reason is, if you've taken karma, or even deeper, the very nature of the world, that it is subject to continuous change, and so stable happiness is not possible here. But even deeper than that, if you look, those whom we consider enlightened, the Buddha himself, or the great Vedantic teachers and the masters in different paths of spiritual traditions, they were in this world. They were enlightened in this world, in this changing world, in this world subject to karma, in this world which is continuously changing, and yet they were able to overcome unhappiness. There are all kinds of sorrows and sufferings came to enlightened ones, and yet they were somehow able to rise above it, above physical pain, above the misbehavior of others, above failures. They were able to rise above it Somehow they were very happy people, which means it's not even the nature of the world which is the source of evil. Here comes the Advaitic analysis, and this is the final thing I'll say in this question, is that we come back to a primordial ignorance. We do not know what we are. This ignorance or avidya, when this is overcome and we know the nature of things, our own nature and the nature of everything as Brahman, from an Advaitic perspective, as Brahman, all this show will go on. In the midst of this show, in the midst of this play of cause and effect karma, in the midst of this impermanent world, I will still say that all this is an appearance of my real nature Brahman, which I have now realized. And from that perspective, it's perfectly all right, even in the midst of all this suffering. So this is how you overcome evil. What evil is? It is a distinctly powerful force. It is karma. It is the nature of the world. Ultimately, it's ignorance, and it should be overcome.
Again, Swamiji, the master of all answers. I mean, what a wonderful way to answer that question about evil, and obviously linking it with the Holocaust or just in general tragedies of the world. But also highlighting that even the enlightened people have to go through suffering. You know, Kabirji still lived in a hut. Ramana Maharishi got cancer, same with Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Swami Vivekananda died as a young man. So it's everybody suffers. Or as Swamiji said, everyone has to go through dissatisfaction. How you deal with the dissatisfaction, how you understand your true nature is more important, and that's what matters really. At the end of the day, it's when we're ignorant of who we really are, we get trapped in the thought pattern of, oh, I'm in suffering, or I am dissatisfied with life, or I am going through these problems. When we associate ourselves and identify only as the body and mind, this is a natural consequence. But once we understand we are this ultimate reality, this pure awareness, where can feeling empty arise? Where can feeling suffering arise, or dissatisfaction? Where can we will not be attracted by the transient nature of happiness and sadness? Things like that. Again, Swamiji's brilliant. What a great way to answer questions.
Two questions, similar questions. I will read them out together. One is from Vidula. She says, I have a doubt which perturbed me for years. In my youth, I lived and grew up in Calcutta, fairly religious family. My parents were doctors. My mother served at the Ramakrishna Seva Sadan in Calcutta in the 50s. I insisted I accompany her every Sunday morning. I was instructed that girls didn't meditate or take mantra diksha. Why has this been and still is part of the teaching? I was told that girls could do only puja and seva, but not even study the Vedas. I never understood the rationality behind this reasoning, and I still don't. This is entirely wrong. Girls take mantra diksha. They have for ages, and now, of course, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of women who take mantra diksha, millions of women who meditate. All the spiritual practices are open to everybody. This has not been a part of the teaching. It's never been and nor is a part of the teaching. There were restrictions. Now, having said that, all right, there's a similar question. Let me read that out also. Somebody else was asking, are women created lesser than men? Why do we show Lakshmi Devi at the feet of Vishnu? Why did Rama not protect Sita? And so on and so forth. Okay, so the answer to this is no, men and women are equal. From an Advaitic perspective, this distinction is not there at all. We are existence, consciousness, place. We are being and awareness. We are creatures of, we are spirit. Gender comes much later. Physically, male, female, and now we have multiple genders, especially if you are in New York. We have 23, I think, legal genders in this state. All of that is body, and it can affect the mind also. So it's not just body, it can affect body, mind. And if you accept all that, that's still fine. But Advaita Vedanta says that is still not your real identity. Your real identity is sexless, is beyond gender. Being beyond gender, you may play a gender role depending upon the body-mind complex that one has. From an Advaitic perspective,
you can imagine Jordan Peterson will not be happy with Swamiji's answer there, where he has embraced all types of genders and says, essentially we're all genderless, we all are without gender, but again, on the relative level, he has not denied that people may have different gender identities. But someone like Jordan Peterson, who is obviously, I would like to say now, a spokesperson for the Abrahamic faith or doctrine or dogma, would have a very tough time with Swamiji on this. Very interesting. See two different ways of approach, and I mean, the Ramakrishna mission has been accused in the past of being quite Marxist and leftist in its approach, although they don't formally align to any political ideology. And this is me doing my research on them anyway. So it's interesting, and what's interesting is I think people it just even today. Oh yeah, so I was watching a reaction video by Nextvid. He did one of Swamiji's about the meaning of Om, I think, and in there I saw a comment by somebody saying that the texts have been understood by a Marxist, has been created by a Marxist scholar. In my opinion, that person's actually telling me that they are more they're definitely right wing, just by the way they've just written the comment, but also they've not understood the full message of Vedanta or Hinduism, which is that there is, for me to be against someone's identification of their gender or their sexuality or anything like that, it means that I'm invested in the body-mind complex. Therefore, I do not see everything on the absolute level. And the absolute level is meant to control, or I would say, should bring quality control to the relative level. So, for example, if everything is equal, I would see that trickle down to the relative reality. If I don't, that means I don't see the absolute level of reality. So this is a very, again, nuanced points which I don't imagine everybody will understand. But that's why people cannot understand people like Swamiji or the order that he's from, where they refrain from offering any political viewpoints. But obviously, it's a shame that equality is now a political point when really it should be a humanitarian question. That why aren't we all equal? Why aren't the laws of lands treating everybody equally? Everybody is unique. No one person is the same as the other, regardless of what identity people may group themselves in masses with. Everybody's still very different and unique. So, and this is the message of most of the places of the East. If you look at obviously Advaita Vedanta, but even Sikhism, those things are. It seems to be relatively normal to see the equality. But yeah, interesting question.
we are all absolutely equal. Not only equal, we are the same infinite reality. Now, having said that, I am not denying reality or the practical reality of the societies we live in. Remember, India and indeed almost all of the world, they have been for a long time patriarchal societies. So where where there were power differences, there were inequalities in gender roles. the prestige, the power, the rights given to one gender were not extended to the other gender for a very long time. And that was unfair and unjust. And I'm so glad that we are living in an age where we are remedying that pretty fast. I mean, I often meet young women who are studying here in the United States, in Canada, other Western countries, from India. They've come, and or they're working here in New York, for example. And I often think, and sometimes I ask them, think about your lives and compare it to the life of your mothers and the lives of your grandmothers, and see the enormous difference that has happened, and the differences which are still coming. So it's a silent revolution which has happened, and it has its effect on the world of spirituality, an entirely positive effect, I think. So what should have always been is now becoming more of a fact. All spiritual paths are equally open to all of us, no matter what race, what gender, where we live, what our age is, and so on. In all respects, spiritual path, in Vedanta especially, it's equally open to all. The doors to enlightenment are equally open to all, because we are ultimately one reality.
See, a number one thing I'll mention, this is when you see the synthesis between practice and knowledge, or teachings. If we say we are all equal, then we are all the same, we're made from the same source, or we've all come from that one, even if we say we come from the same one God, yeah, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. How can you have divisions? How can you allow divisions to be in your own mind? We can't do much about the divisions in society alone, but within our own minds, we can talk about if we have any divisions and any way we divide people. The other thing that Swamiji mentioned was the silent revolution that's coming about. I completely agree. I think it's great. I don't think it matters uh, who you are and what you are. You should be able to live a spiritual life regardless. It doesn't matter. Um, it doesn't matter about. It doesn't matter. The differences do not matter. What matters more is that the doors should be open for everyone to enter the spiritual path. And if we truly believe in the oneness of God, or the oneness of reality, or the oneness of pure awareness, then we cannot close the door on people, whether it's because of their caste, their color, their race, their nationality, their gender, their sexuality, their age, and so on and so forth. Anybody that does that, in my opinion, is not really practicing what they're talking about. So another sign of Swamiji being a genuine teacher is this. His answer there is key, and also a bit telling about his personal view. I thought this was where he was a little personal.
Let me So somebody is asking, Atma, very well named. I have read Soham, which means I am he, means Jivatma is Saguna Brahman. I've also read Soham means Atma is Paramatma, both correct according to perspective. Both mean exactly the same thing. Jivatma means the sentient being. Saguna Brahman means Ishvara. Atma means self. Paramatma means the supreme self. Basically, what it means is, how can a jiva be equal to or one with God? Saguna Brahman, as I said, is God. So when you say jivatma is Saguna Brahman, or it will translate into the sentient being is God. What it means is, sentient being, individual beings like us, individual sentient beings, we are pure consciousness, limited by individual minds and bodies. Bodies are different, clearly. Minds are different, clearly. But we are unlimited consciousness appearing through the lens, the limitations of individual bodies and minds. Appearing through the lens of one individual body and mind, I am one sentient being. That same unlimited consciousness appearing through all bodies and minds taken collectively is what we call Saguna Brahman. Consciousness in association with the totality, with this cosmos, is Saguna Brahman. The moment you say sentient beings, Jivatma is Saguna Brahman, is God, sentient being is God, what it means, individual sentient being is actually not an individual, is pure consciousness. God is actually not God, is pure consciousness. As pure consciousness, the individual sentient being and God are one and the same. As individual sentient being and as God, and that level they are different. Characters are different at the level of the movie, but they are at the same time, they are nothing other than pictures on a screen. And same actor may play a beggar and an emperor in a Broadway play. But really speaking, when you say the beggar is the emperor, so there's an actor who is acting as a beggar and in another role acting as an emperor, maybe goes to the green room and changes the dress and comes out. Depending on the dress and the dialogue and the acting, the characters are different. Now, if somebody says the beggar is the emperor, on the surface of it, it's a ridiculous statement. How can a beggar be an emperor? They look different, their powers are different, their status is different, so on. But what he means is the same person. The reality behind both characters is the same actor. One actor who is not a beggar, who's not an emperor, is appearing as both. Similarly, one absolute reality is appearing as you, the individual being, as the God of this universe, and indeed this entire universe itself. That is the meaning. Jane is asking, are there Vedanta nuns? What is the training like and the daily life like for them? What vows are there? It is exactly the same as monks, as sannyasis. There are sannyasinis. So in our Vedanta societies in the United States, there are nuns in our Santa Barbara temple. It's a very beautiful Vedanta temple in Santa Barbara. You just look it up, Santa Barbara Vedanta temple. Extraordinary place. And it's run entirely by the nuns. There is another convent for Vedanta nuns in Hollywood. Look up the Vedanta Society, Southern California and Hollywood, and there is a convent which is, of course, all nuns. And there is another place for nuns in the Vedanta Society of Northern California in San Francisco. So their vows and their training, the practices they have are exactly the same as the vows and practices and training we undergo. What is their daily life like? You should ask a nun. Nataraj says, can you pursue a spiritual life and seek enlightenment as an atheist? In Advaita, it seems reasonable. Frequent invocations, omniscient beings, Vedanta obsession dilutes the message. Okay. Can you pursue a spiritual life and seek enlightenment as an atheist? Atheist, what would you mean by an atheist? If you mean that you don't believe, the technical direct meaning of an atheist is not a theist. A theist is one who believes in God as understood in theistic religions. An omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent being who is benevolent and just and is the creator of the universe and so on. Well, yes, in India, it was known that spirituality can be theistic and non-theistic. So there are non-theistic philosophies, like Sankhya, for example, is non-theistic, where you only have to realize yourself as pure consciousness. You have Jainism and Buddhism, which are entirely non-theistic. In some sense, the Mimamsa philosophy is also non-theistic. And there are many theistic philosophies in Hinduism, in Vedanta. The dualistic schools are all theistic. Now, in that sense, if you don't believe in theism, in God of religion, can you be spiritual? Yes, one can be spiritual, definitely. The Buddhists don't believe in the God of theistic religions. Sankhyans don't believe in Patanjali Yoga also believes in God, but not exactly in the kind of God. I'm making a technical distinction here, kind of God which is accepted in theistic religions. In Advaita, it includes both approaches. The self-inquiry approach of the non-theistic paths and the God approach of the theistic path. And what it points to is that both take you to the same reality. Frequent invocations to omniscient beings in Vedanta sessions dilutes the message. Remember, these are classical texts. They were in the classical setting of they're based on the Upanishads. So the ultimate reality, you are that ultimate reality. This is what you're interested in. If you're not particularly interested in God, that doesn't matter. But Vedanta is pretty comprehensive. Vedanta says that ultimate reality is you, no doubt, you, Nataraj. But it's also God, the God of religion, which you may not believe in. But from Vedantic perspective, that exists. That becomes a matter of faith. But suppose you say, I don't want to believe in that. I don't want to commit to that. I just want to realize my infinite nature, what I truly am, without going through the God route. Can you do that? Classical Advaita Vedanta would seem that it includes God all the time. But if you take books like Ashtavakra Gita, if you take the approach of Ramana Maharshi, in certain sections in Swami Vivekananda himself, Avadhuta Gita, hardly or almost no mention of God, and it's not necessary.
So I think
before Amatat interrupts, I really like Swamiji's answer there. That was a very unique one. You can believe in the formless awareness without ascribing it to God. I think it's particularly comfortable. Even with my approach that I do on the podcast is relatively agnostic. I don't like to say there is a God because I don't think it's actually necessary. I think what's more important, and what's more important first of all, is that we should understand that it's about knowing our true self, knowing who we really are, knowing what we really are, understanding that you are that. That is the most important thing. After that, if you choose to believe in God, that's fine. But you should see that God and you are the same at that point. When you understand your own true self, you don't need to know God as a separate being. What should automatically happen is that you should find you and God are the same, as Swamiji said. But say somebody is seeking God and they want to know God first, they want to realize God first. Even then, even for you to validate that you've realized God, guess what comes before realize God? You. So you are the most important thing, regardless whether you want to believe in God or don't want to believe in God. My approach of Advaita Vedanta is similar to kind of similar to Swamiji, but Swamiji does ascribe to God a lot more than I do. I see God as sometimes necessary depending on who is asking a question, who is seeking. But if somebody had to ask me honestly, what do I think? I would say you don't need God. What you need is to understand what you really are. Now, this means that, yes, my audience becomes less because I get rid of the notion of God. But I find it's more honest. A lot of people, they want to hang on God, the idea of God. God is doing things for me. God is planning this for me. God is making the choices for me. God knows better than me. But when you get up in the morning, is God brushing your teeth or are you brushing your teeth? When you eat breakfast, are you eating breakfast or is God choosing what you eat for breakfast? Did you go to the grocery store or did God go to the grocery store and therefore you got a bunch of, let's say you're healthy, a bunch of fruit and vegetables in your fridge picked by God? So it's really important that we understand what we're really after. And that should define our path for us. That should define how we move forward. So for me, you know, those that follow my podcast and follow um my content, you understand where I'm coming from. And I think that the message that I give is what is needed today. I don't think it's necessary to bring in God or the soul or any of those things. Eh, these confuse people more than they resolve issues. And the reason being is it's not that God and the soul are wrong. It's actually we don't have the time to explain those things. Therefore, if you don't explain those things, they're wrongfully understood. And to really understand them, you need time. You need to put in incredible focus. You can't simply know it by a 30-second video on TikTok um, or learning something just solely on YouTube. You have to. It's a lifetime of study to understand what God and the soul is. You need that foundation, which is not discussed because everybody, if you have a mass following, you tend to speak on one hymn sheet. You speak from one particular level. So that's the thing. So for me personally, if you really want to know the truth, it's better to know what you are because you have the first-hand experience of what you are, and that's the reason why that I find that approach more important. So you could say that I am more of an agnostic Advaitin, um, but being, but then at the same time, I won't. I won't throw the baby out of the bathwater either with the idea of God. So yeah, thank you, Jim Arthur, for enjoying it. Yeah, I've actually enjoyed this, and I've actually gone through the whole video. You know, this is relatively nearly 2 hours, and it's been 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I've enjoyed myself. As you mentioned, it's because I admire Swamiji, and Swamiji is one of the not just a great intellectual, but a great uh, anybody I know who's met him um, has told me how nice he is as a person, how humble he is. So that is a good sign. Um, and then, but yeah, so yeah, I've really enjoyed this so far. I don't know what the next 20 minutes are, but I'm going to probably end it there. Although I would love to continue on more, I feel like I need to go to the restroom. I need to I need to find a way where I can actually pause this stuff and find a way where I can. I mean, I can mute things, but you know where you can put a countdown for a break. I think there is something where you can do that, and maybe we will do that. Maybe in the future, find ways to do that. Um, or just do like I did earlier and say, let's have a 2 minute break. But this is a good way to break a video up. Let me first see. Otherwise, we'll have a 2 minute break and then continue on. Okay, we'll finish it. We'll end it here. So, but thank you for joining. Thank you for those that have stayed here for the 2 hours and 40 odd minutes. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you liked it, and we'll do more of these where I can be more relaxed and listen to more of these deeper videos. I think they're more important. You know, looking at the great teachers, but it's also good to look at for entertainment, looking at people like Tony Parsons and stuff. So we'll do that for sure next time. we'll probably look at Tony Parsons. But otherwise, if this is your first time, what I will say is I do these lives now and then, so it's good to be it's good to know my it's good to be subscribed to my channel, so you can get to be notified of the times I go live. That's really important. The other thing that I want to mention is I'm going to put the link in here. That is, if you've not signed up to my Patreon, do sign up to my Patreon. It helps to support the channel. I'll put the link in the chat there. So if you haven't joined, please do so. If you what happens if you join Patreon? Now things have changed a little bit more since I last chatted, because now I'm on Apple subscriptions as well. That means that there's ad-free versions, and there's actually ads now on my podcast. So if you listen to it free, you will get the ads. But if you subscribe to the Apple subscription or Patreon, you will get the ad-free version, which is pretty good. And also you get the guided meditations and the full conversations with the bearded mystic. So those are the things that you get to enjoy if you subscribe to Patreon and to Apple subscription. Both are for $10, and obviously that's $10 a month, but according to where you are in the world, it charges accordingly. So yeah, so that's so it just helps with the running cost. I would like to do these restreams where I'm able to up the quality of the video. So, but it's well expensive to do so. I think it's like $50 a month. And to be honest, there's enough cost with the podcast for me to be dealing with than this at the minute. So, the more people that sign up to the Patreon and the Apple subscriptions, I can then improve the quality of this. So, but yeah, other than that, I just want to say thank you, and I shall see you all again soon. So maybe Tuesday, we'll keep it light. We'll maybe it depends on my mood. I'll see what I plan, what video to look at, and we may even start a Brokshana Buddhi in terms of reading the scripture, the foundational text. So normally I said that we'll do one reaction video or reaction live or just a general Q&A and then do foundational text. So let's see how it goes. But thank you, and I shall see you again soon. Have a great weekend and enjoy yourselves to the max. Look forward to the podcast that's releasing tomorrow. It's a continuation of my thoughts on the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verses 30 to 33. So yeah, do take a look at that. And then next week, my conversations with the bearded mystic with Akil, or known as Samivada on TikTok, that will be releasing sometime next week. So I shall look forward to that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye.